Hey, hi, Vim.
Hey,
Am I audible properly?
yes.
Okay. Not sure is how many folks will join today. Uh, at least I know that Bernard he has some different overlapping meeting, so he might be joining little late, uh, 5 or 10 minutes. So let's wait for other folks. Uh, okay, Vim. I think we could start. Anyway, it will be recorded so folks could check it later. So I have prepared one small agenda. Are you there, Vim? Hello?
Yes, I'm here. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so I'll share my screen. I have prepared the agenda. Um, okay, so I have prepared some small content for today, like overview and recap and discussion, and some user stories that we have prepared and wanted to discuss in the SIG one since last two meeting, but we did not get a chance. So we have prepared some user stories so that we can clearly see that means what exactly the service assurance would be meaning in a nephew, and what could be the scope of it, and finally we'll just discuss on the face-to-face activity. So like where we could involve and present our idea. So okay, I'll start with the slide deck that I have prepared that we can use for our nephew day also, face-to-face meeting. So in the left side, you can see from the last discussion, I have collected the diagram. And just to give the recap, we had a very good discussion around it. Like what exactly the assurance mean, and we went through surveys, different domains also, and a different hierarchy also, like surveys and NS surveys, end-to-end surveys, and infrastructure. So just to clarify once again to everyone, that we are trying to limit the scope of service assurance to NF and infrastructure layer. So what we will try to so here the first block, which mean for the monitoring, so where the observability will come. So that project will be collecting the different KPI or different parameters from the NF and infrastructure level, and it would be available maybe in a Prometheus, or let's say assume that in some other mean. So let's say it is available, and then the role of the service assurance comes, that it fetches it uses those parameters and provide a mechanism to take any corrective action. And there our correlation logic could fit and take a decision. And also, I would like to mention that we need to think around the multiple use cases. So currently, we in R1 we had delivered a deployment of core NX. So we could think around how we could take advantage of service assurance in case of uh, in case of delivering some QS parameter for the UPF or any other NF. So we can think around it. Also, there are another opportunity that we can think around the RAN side, where the OA folks and teams are working to deploy the RAN. So there we have the opportunity, we could push some configuration in the RAN side, and bring some quality assurance. So there we can bring it. So that is our current scope. Let's say tomorrow, if you decides to take some control over the NS services, so that at that time we can think around some upper layer. So as I mentioned the closed loop, right, or decision making or service assurance. So currently, we could identify there are three closed loop that I try to mention in this right side of the diagram. So if you understand correctly, on the top we have the MSO, management and service orchestrator. Then we have our domain orchestrator, nephew. And the bottom we have our workload cluster. Okay, let me just check. Okay, Bernard is also there. Yeah, hi Bernard.
Hi, sorry for being late. I was stuck in a management
No
presentation.
problem.
Sorry.
It's a very small crowd, so yeah, no problem. So I just reiterating over what we did recently and what we discussed. So I came up with another diagram to understand the scope of assurance. So just I was explaining it, and the right side of it, I was trying to fit in the entire stack. Like on the top we have management and service orchestrator, then our domain orchestrator NFU, and the bottom will definitely our workload cluster. So that is having the different NFs, NF operator, right? So if you see it closely, you will find there are three loops working on it. So I'll start from the topmost one. The service or MSO, generally it has a bigger it plays a bigger role in assurance. So it will take care about the end-to-end assurance. So there it will interact with multiple domain controllers or different domains, and take care about end-to-end service. And in the same context, it would be interacting with the nephew, right? And And the second loop, okay, before going to the second loop, I'll directly jump on the third loop. So the closest loop to the NFIC, that is the NF operator. So the NF operator actually take care about the NF. In other words, if you visualize, it is taking care of the entire LCM for the NF. It spawns it and also scales it. So yeah, that is the nearest closed loop I see it. And the second the middle level of the closed loop, that we could identify like Nephew management cluster, helping to create this entire closed loop. Like there we create a package and package variant, and that package variant gets hydrated. And once this gets hydrated, it will get deployed in the workload cluster. And once it gets deployed, it will send some status towards the management cluster using the edge watcher, or there could be some different things like you can visualize, you can think like Prometheus maybe tracking it. So it is collecting those status and feeding back to the nephew. And let's say if we want to perform certain scaling aspects or something, then we can modify our package region, and again config sync will apply it. So that is also another kind of closed loop or assurance part that is happens using the nephew management cluster. So this is the entire three closed loops are there. So once we understand this closed loop, I'll go a little deeper on the assurance part. What exactly I think it there. So uh, so Nephew when it as a domain orchestrator, when it take a package and create a package reason, so that time it deploys the NF, right? So we could think like I would like to monitor my NF, right? So that uh, it's a monitoring parameters should be dynamically injected to the NF, right? So there actually assurance could help us. It will create some kind of uh, policy, or I would say or another words, some configuration or configuration for the monitoring, and it will pass it to it. And also while we are hydrating our package, right? So that time we can create a new resources. So that will be responsible for monitoring of those NF. So you can visualize it could it as a sidecar also. Like you created a KRM which can create a sidecar. It will read those logs, and it pushes to some log analysis module. And otherwise, we can think like we prepare some kind of Prometheus parameters and some KRMs which are related to Prometheus, and try to inject in our package and try to deploy it. So here I'm calling it like we are trying to push some kind of policies. So for the NF with the help of assurance. Okay. So once we are able to deploy the NF, and we'll start collecting some kind of monitoring parameters. Uh, it could be logs also. So it depends on how we will define our use case. So once we have those NF related parameters, so the thing is that we need to correlate it, and we need to take some kind of decisions, right? And this idea, actually we have prepared some user stories that will give you the clear idea of what exactly the scope we are trying to identify. But yeah, this was the holistic picture that I'm trying to visualize for it, for the assurance. So any questions, actually, Wim or Bernard?
what I believe is important when we are sort of describing these diagrams is to make sure that we write down the basic considerations which are behind, for instance, this hierarchy of assurance models. That means not only have the diagram, because to be honest, I believe sometimes it will be confusing because there are very many arrows and they're not explained. Sort of in this sense, it would be great if we could sort of try to highlight those basic principles so that it's better understood sort of what is meant with these different areas. The second thing which comes to my mind is that you've already started explaining it a little bit, that in order to sort of make assurance work, there are certain sort of fundamental capabilities to be provided. So there's a function to collect information, there's a function to correlate information, there's a function to detect certain patterns, and then sort of function to trigger policies, etc. So I think it might make sense to sort of talk about all those different functions which are sort of needed for service assurance, and then say, for instance, just imagine for correlation. Yeah, that means if we want to correlate, for instance, for impact or root cause analysis, how does a certain situation, certain outage affect an intent? Then we would have to understand the dependency tree between the intent and the resource which have actually been provisioned. And this is something where we say Nephew will decompose or sort of develop and derive the sort of basic resources needed to sort of support a certain intent. And at the same sense, it will also have to provide the topology information, which would then allow to support the correlation task needed for service assurance. And in this way, we could try to sort of explain in which elements Nephew can contribute to the overall service assurance part.
Yeah, I totally agree. Bernard. Actually, yeah, of course, I completely agree with you, because directly jumping on this diagram will confuse it. Better we should go to our second second document, which clearly captures the idea, means what exactly we are trying to do it. So let me open it. Yeah, this is the user story. Yeah, so here is the part. Okay. So yeah, this actually gives the holistic picture. What is our scope? And the most important line I feel that we say, Nephew may support service assurance task, but it is not a service assurance solution itself. So yeah, so that I'll try to put this slide as the first one.
I have a bit of an observation there, right?
Yeah.
Okay, if you are a domain controller and you don't do service assurance, in my view, you're not a domain controller.
Actually, Wim, we tried to address this point properly, because what happens when we are a domain controller, and when we talk about this service word, so what happens if you see from the
no, forget the service, just the domain. I'm talking about the domain itself.
Okay, yeah, so that we are trying to deal with the infrastructure and the network functions. So that assurance that we are trying to give it.
Yeah, but you on bullet number 3 or bullet number 2, you say may support service, or bullet number 3, yeah, may support service tasks, but it's not a service assurance solution. So my view is that if you are not doing service assurance in your domain, you are not a domain controller.
Yeah, actually, last.
Are you regarding Nephew to be a domain controller?
That's what we aim to be, I think, yes. That's what we put on the slides.
Why I'm saying that is because I believe then we need to describe a little bit more in detail what Nephew actually is. Because currently, my impression is that Nephew is very much taking care of the configuration part and sort of facilitating that. And as a result, sort of providing a set of resources which are then deployed to a cluster. And if we want to go for the full closed loop approach, then we would have to extend a little bit more the functionality of what we are wanting to support here. And currently, this was lacking a little bit in sort of the attention which we've been sort of giving to that sort of other part of this loop.
But that's the first thing that we want to clarify, I think, right? Because I do agree with you, Bernard, is that today the focus has been on config, right? But if you look to the topology controller that we are doing in R2, there is feedback on the network functions, right? So we actually get information from the workload. I'm not saying it's extensive, right? But there is something, right? So for me, that's the first clarification. And I'm not making, the only statement that I'm making is that if you want to be a domain controller, then service assurance should be apart from it. That doesn't say that Nefio, that doesn't mean that Nefio, I'm not saying that Nefio will do it, but that's a statement that I would make. And then I think the key question here is Nefio going to evolve to incorporate that, yes or no, right? So I think that's probably the first question we need to ask.
Yeah, we could add the word currently, maybe to this statement.
Currently it doesn't, Currently it doesn't.
So maybe if you would, Subhash, if you would take that word currently into this third bullet point, then I believe in this Word document, I'm not quite sure what that kind of,
I think we should start with clarification is what role or where does Nefio sit here, right? So for me, if I look at a domain controller, service assurance has to be part of it. And the question is, what is, if Nefio doesn't do it, then what?
Yes, I agree.
What part of the domain controller does Nefio focus on?
Yes, good point.
Is it right to write what I captured or any?
No, I mean, is Nefio trying to fulfill the full scope of a domain controller or not, right? I think that's the question.
Right. They fulfill the requirement. Actually, Bernard, my understanding is also in a similar page. We are trying to position Nefio as a domain controller. That also I'm getting the sense. Because we are trying to put under the MSO, right? So it will be talking to domain control and domain, and it is going to manage everything. If we see our 3 swim lane diagram also, so it has all the capability like O2, O1. So kind of it is doing the job of SMO. So when I was preparing the architectural diagram, so I tried to give those functionality here in the Nefio, because I feel it has all the capabilities.
Currently it doesn't, but it could potentially have in order to be a consistent solution. Yes, I agree.
Yeah, I'll just try to open my suggestion that I was trying to give it. Okay. So what I was trying to do, what I was thinking, I was proposing, and also I was trying to open the questions to everyone. Currently, we are doing the configuration as data in the Nefio. That is our current capability. But when we closely observe our 3 swim lane, so Nefio should use Nefio should have the capability of 4COM. Using that, it can interact with the IMS and it can create a workload cluster. So that suffices our O2M interface. And the second part is the NFO capabilities. So there we should able to deploy the NF, and that again by using DMS. So that is a deployment management system. So at third topic, we talk about the O1 interface. To push the configuration or to read some parameters from the NF, right? So that part still it is not discussed, or there's no clear picture is how exactly we are going to do it. But once we complete this 3 interface, it has the capability to called as a one SMO. So that I'm visualizing. I think is that means we are using one another layer for the GitOps and GitOps way of deploying the NF. And if you observe the OR and alliance specification, they are providing one profile, one Kubernetes profile for O2 interface. So it is also available. So I feel it is fitting exactly there. I hope my comments made sense.
Yeah, so, but I was just wondering because I didn't quite get it regarding service assurance in this sort of other loop. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
This sort of the forward approach for provisioning, I understand, yes, but for the backward aspect of collecting information, correlating it, triggering, detecting anomalies, triggering policies, this one I didn't quite get because we simply have a very sort of one-way type of view currently in these architecture diagrams, not talking about the channel back.
Are you, Bernard, so you're referring this diagram, right? If I understand correctly.
Yeah, you were just showing this other diagram with the architecture and how you were provisioning resources, etc. I'm fine with that, but I just wanted to say sort of what happens if something goes wrong? How do you detect that information? Where is it correlated, etc.? This type of information is for me what I would regard to be service assurance. And here, sort of, you're now putting it sort of into a higher domain, yeah, and sort of facilitating that approach. But for instance, this correlation information, how does a high-level intent? I would regard, for instance, any kind of northbound interface potentially to, first of all, not go into the nitty-gritty of the details of the resources, but rather sort of hand over a high-level intent and says, please put the free 5GC onto clusters B and C. And then sort of with the help of the nephew procedures, we would then drill it down and sort of identify all the resources, deploy the resources, etc. And then they would be only managing the high-level resources, not the details. Yes.
Yes. I think this one you have exactly put it there. So,
yes, exactly. And so they would not know about those blue and green and red elements. They would know about sort of the high-level database type of aspect to be rolled out. Yeah.
Yeah. Any comments, Wim, from your side about this scope, what we are thinking, our user story that we are trying to think around the service assurance? Any comments?
See, I think, I mean, to be able to accomplish this, there's a lot of stuff that needs to happen, right? That's my first thing. My personal view is that I think we have to break this down into pieces, right? Because this is a huge topic by itself. And my personal opinion is that we should first resolve observability before we go to service assurance.
Right.
Because we first need to have an ability to get information back from various sources before you can actually do service assurance. So if you ask me, I think we are going a step too quick, a little bit too quick here. I think that's what we want to get to, but to get here from where we are is huge. And so my personal view is we have to break this down into pieces and start with the pieces that we can handle, because this is too big of a topic for where we are today. That doesn't mean we don't have to get here.
Yeah, Wim, I'm with you. What I nevertheless would recommend is that we break down the service assurance and say service assurance sort of from a high level perspective consists of following functions, A, B, C, D. Yeah. Number one. Then say sort of in the nephew context, we're still missing this sort of the closed loop part of a domain controller. And for that purpose, we would have to now address one by one those different functions. Let's start with observability. Say, how can we facilitate that with the help of the nephew procedures? Yeah, and then sort of one by one try to make a check mark on those things which are still missing: correlation, detection of anomalies, and triggering of policies, etc.
Yeah, because typically everything starts with observability, right? So because typically you have let's say correlation rules inside, you have hooks towards the intent and stuff like that. So that's where basically the whole framework is basically depending on that. In my view.
But let's try to make sure. So here we've got sort of at the last bullet point, service assurance requires the consistent interaction of different types of functions. Yeah, so we've got a function which describes the desired target states, qualities. So first of all, what do we want to achieve? Let's say sort of we have that somehow. Yeah, sort of then sort of this correlation information, a set of functions which captures the information. That's the observability part. But for that purpose, if you would be honest, you would also say, what do I want to observe? Because you have to understand you're not trying to observe anything, but sort of a specific set of elements in a specific manner. And so therefore, sort of understanding what is this, what are the elements, what are the resources associated with that, and then going for the capturing that information. And then the last two bullet points, I agree with you, would be the later steps.
Actually, Wim, I might have put some lot of multiple futuristic steps, but here, if you go to this function design, maybe you feel that we can still attempt it. Like if I will try to go one by one. So let's see your comments also. So what we are thinking, we would like to define a function which describes the desired target state, qualities, objectives, and constant for a resource or a set of resource. So we are trying to capture the one desired state, which just to maintain the quality of service. So that we'll capture, and we'll try to compare with the current state. So that function we definitely we can realize in assurance part. The next one, a function which describes which resource and services are subject to the service assurance mechanism and how this relate to one another. So here we are talking about how we are going to correlate the higher intent with the resources, or even the intent are correlated to each other. So we are talking about those relationships, right? So again, that won't be depending on observability. So somewhere it will be helpful. And third one, a set of function which captures the information regarding the current state and the qualities of the resources. And I guess the current state that function could be observability, right? I think, Bernard, to capture the current state.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So this point actually where the observability comes into the picture. And the fourth one, the function which correlates and evaluates this state and quality information and determines if there is a discrepancy to the desired state. So again, this part we can achieve it. A function which trigger action on the orchestration solution of the same level or the lower level. So here we talk about taking one rectification step, and we can issue some policies which can take action locally. So if you observe it, we need help of observability here, and the remaining items still we can parallelly go, and by the time we get a clarification how the observability going to happen, or how we are going to configure it, how we are going to consume it. So that time we can integrate it. But yeah, these four items I feel we can proceed, and we take some kind of hard coded way for the step number 3, or maybe some sidecar small it's like a demo kind of scenario we can prepare, and time being, just resolve this third item and make us some progress. Does it make sense, Vim, to you?
I mean, there's, yeah, whether it makes sense or not, because for me, clarification is you talk about desired state and actual state.
Right.
What state are you talking about?
Like we want to know which intent is getting impacted because some resource is down. I'll take a just example. Let's say we are deploying some free 5G code, and let's say some UPF is down, right? So we're not able to understand the impact of it on our in the management system. We're not able to understand the impact on our services, right? So that correlation is needed.
But now you're going on the service level. I think the best person that understands if your intent is impacted is the intent itself.
Yeah, we are talking about intent. Yes.
Right. So because you're mixing service with what we are doing, right? So let's not focus on service. It's service above us, right? We are working on the domain that we are having. So if there is something on the infra that affects the NF, there's nobody better than the intent itself to figure that out.
Yeah, but what we would need to understand the relationship between the intent and the infra and all the resources which have been derived out of the Nepio configuration process. So if we have got the situation that we've got sort of a high level intent, and we determine that in order to fulfill that intent, we need to create various resources, then sort of this mapping information would be needed in order to support this assurance aspect. Just for the simple information, yes, there is an issue which might have an impact on that intent. Not even doing any kind of sort of clarification of if it is critical or not, but just saying there are events which are related to that intent. And this mapping information is something which I would regard to be essential for any kind of observability aspects, because you can, of course, immediately try to say, I've rolled out Prometheus and I'm tracking now the pods and services, but you wouldn't know how that relates to the intent.
But what you typically see when you look at implementation, this is where what you do in the, it's kind of, the way I look at it is the following, right? You're interested in something, right? And my view, I mean, I've implemented this myself. So what it comes down to is that the person that needs to determine whether he is impacted, he should take ownership of trying to figure out, trying to create what I call a watch, right, on the resource. Because first of all, he probably has triggered the creation or the instantiation of it, or he has validated dependency upon it, right? So he is the best person to know what to check for, right? So, and as a result, what you typically then do is you actually go to an observability system to say, hey, I am this intent and I'm interested in these resources, and please give me information if something changes. Right?
I'm totally fine with that. But what I wanted to mention is that in the Nepio process, in the configuration process, we've got exactly the situation that sort of from the northbound interface, let's say, we get this high-level resource model. The people who are issuing that resource model have no idea how it is going to be processed in the Nepio context. So we need to have as a byproduct of that Nepio process also this information, which would then be allowing us to, let's say, customize the monitoring system, for instance, to say, look here, please pay special attention on those resources because they're important for my intent.
Yeah, and there's going to be, so in release 2, by the way, I'm not sure whether you're aware of the topology controller that Steven is doing. It's basically addressing this in a, let's say, as a demo tool, right? Call it.
Very good.
Is this the full way that we have to do it? No, right? But there's going to be an edge watcher. So there's going to be a watcher agent that sits on the workload cluster who feeds back information to the edge watcher. And then it uses that to take information of what we call a topology, which is a collection of network functions, right? So that's basically what the topology controller is going to do. So for me, that's the first attempt to conceptualize something.
Well, that's great. So let's just imagine that sort of this topology controller, it's already sort of creating a view, which is basically a little bit sort of, how should I say, summarizing what a service assurance or monitoring tool would also do. So if we would sort of,
No, go ahead, sorry.
If we're looking at that, we could, for instance, say, this is an example of how we sort of make use of that information, but we could also specifically externalize that information and say, if we would want to make use of any kind of other solution, we could make use of the same information and hand it over to a service assurance system or whatever to support that type of mechanism. If you get what I'm trying to aim for.
No, so, correct. So, because service assurance doesn't have to be linked to configuration, right? So that you can also do service assurance without doing configuration, right? So they are not necessarily tied. I mean, they can be tied, but they don't have to be.
Correlation. You want to do this correlation part. Yeah, that means you want to understand how does the intent relate to what you're observing. And so therefore, if we are having this topology information, let's make use of that. Let's externalize that and say, look here, there's not only the possibility to make use of that in the context of what we are demonstrating here, but if someone would come up with the idea of wanting to facilitate that information for other purposes, then sort of feel free, and you could also integrate that into other kind of frameworks. And this is, by the way, going to typically be the case because typically operators have solutions already in place and would like to integrate that into their end-to-end monitoring setup.
Yeah. Now, my personal view is, okay, I have given some feedback. I think the implementation that we are using is not yet right from my point of view, but we are demonstrating the concept, right?
Agree. So that's fine. Yeah. Agree.
So that's basically what Steven is working on for release 2 as part of topology control. Is this a full-blown service assurance? By no means, right? Is this a demonstration to show something? And it's really focused purely on deployment, right? So it doesn't do much today. But for me, we should use that as a basis to reason about, right? And what we are missing, what is wrong, what needs to enhance and stuff like that. So that's my take about it.
Wim, so that is one use case, right, where we are observing all the NF and trying to put whether my topology is up or not, right? So that is the one use case. So if we try to come up with some generic operator, maybe so that correlates resource intents, everything. So those discussion we can have it actually, and we can try. We can try to take a refer a topology controller and try to maybe create some another generic service assurance system. I feel that would be my comment. Right.
But if you look on how it works, right, it's very simple. So you have a generic data collector, right, which is what I call the observability, and then the intent basically hooks to it. That's all you need, right?
Yeah. I totally agree.
I like simple. I like simple. Let's make it as simple as possible. Yeah. So if we've got that and simply make sure that things work together, that's great. But we should really make that really tangible in the sense of, yes, we've got this topology information. We can use it for various purposes. One purpose here for observability and hooking it into it. And an example is our topology manager. Yeah, but we should try to make that available for the further discussions. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and my view on architecture, how this should look like, is that we need a generic observability thing, right?
Yes.
That multiple people can subscribe to get information on the resources that are needed, right? And even that observability system could have hooks to do correlation. So, for example, I always try to focus on the lowest level, right? So let's say, and it depends a little bit because depending on the environment you're in, it matters or it doesn't matter. But let's say a server goes down into a cluster, right? So you probably get hundreds of events, right? But the good thing with Kubernetes is, okay, it will reschedule the pod. But what you have to do, for example, in your observability system is to do fault correlation, for example, to say, okay, all these things don't matter. It's actually the server who went down, and that's the root cause, right? So,
exactly.
And then by doing so, the upper systems, and for me that's a pattern that you can reuse across the board, right? So, for example, you can use that pattern. For example, if you have, let's say, 20 network functions deployed somewhere, and you believe you set a threshold that if 80% of them are not functioning, you have a problem, right? You don't have to subscribe to each individual function, but you have a set of information that describe the whole set, right? And the higher level system just described to that. So you see that in that observability system, you can build in these hierarchical correlation rules that provide that more abstracted information based on the sources that it gets. And then the higher level intents can subscribe to that. So you see for me, there's a pattern that basically it's reusable across the board. And by doing so, you have very simple building blocks that gives you a very powerful system.
Yep, I like that idea.
Yes.
Can we try to sort of depict that in some kind of very crude, simplistic fashion?
So I would recommend to basically document what we are doing in the topology controller as a starting point, because you see all the components getting there, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
And then we can take it from there to say, okay, we need to make this more generic and and so on and so forth. So, but that's, in my view, as a baseline, it's a good baseline to start from.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because in my view, you see a lot of the components coming together.
If you could share the link to the document where Stephen is sort of capturing the basic ideas, that would be great. Yeah.
There has been a presentation, right? Topology.
Is there any group around it? Any?
See, this should have been delivered in R1, but we didn't get there, right? Okay. But it's part of R2. There has been a document, but the question is, where do you find it?
Or we could maybe Subhash, you could reach out to Stephen, and then he could maybe.
Yeah, maybe that's best. Yeah. Maybe maybe that's the easiest way to do so.
Okay.
And maybe document those elements, right? Whether they are right or not, that's not yet
determined.
Let's say, determined, because there's an edge watcher in the workload. So the components are basically very simple. You have an edge watcher in the workload cluster, where you can basically subscribe dynamically which events you have, right? Mm-hmm. And then, and I'm not sure whether that's the way that we have to do it. And then there's a gRPC, ISO to expose a gRPC service that the edge watcher that lives in the management cluster is subscribing to, and then the topology controller is on the management cluster that that has a hook towards the edge watcher, and it derives based on a graph a certain information. I don't know exactly how that works, but that's the high level view of how it works.
I remember,
but for example,
that diagram Stephen has given at the R1 time.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, correct.
Let me check it. Sure. Okay, I'll check the document. And I think I have one more comment that we should try to make our system loosely coupled. Like only one component should not do the observability, and also consuming the events. And a lot of stuff it should not do. So the service assurance system, I feel it can make it more simpler.
Yeah. So in this case, the service assurance is distributed through all the intents.
Yeah.
And you can do it at every level you want.
Yes. That is also our thinking. Yes.
So the way it's distributed is every intent does the service assurance.
Yeah.
There is actually a good RFC in IETF that describes the whole framework, by the way. So let me try. There's a RFC in IETF. They took a bit of time. Intense service assurance, but it's actually very simple if you here I found it. It's not yet RFC. Yeah, it's RFC. Yeah, here you
Did
go.
you share it somewhere?
I will do right away.
Okay.
I'll put it in the chat. So there's an RFC. This one.
Okay. I'll just click on it. Okay, thank
It
you.
describes the.
Yeah. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so it describes the everything what I said is here basically.
Okay. I see. I think this is a valuable input for us. It will help us to converge somewhere. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Shall I jump on our third point because we have another 8 minutes left? Shall I jump on it?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So the next item is our face-to-face meeting. So there we have slot for service assurance and observability part. So Bernard, so could we take this content and try to present here? If you are traveling or attending the event?
I'm not attending. That's the difficulty. So I will be participating in the panel discussion and try to also stay awake, but I won't be attending the meeting personally.
Okay. So I'm preparing the content. I just had some chat with Tal, so he is ready to present it. So I'll just combine this slides, this two, three from this slide deck. And do you think is it a good idea to open this picture because might create some confusion and
again, sort of, it's not explaining itself easily, and that's why I would be a little bit cautious. I would rather want to, if we've got this audience here, rather step by step take the people along this story here and say, in Nefio, if we look at the overall ambition, coming to the remark of Wim being Nefio being a domain controller, we're missing the service assurance part. And for that, we need to talk about following functions, which need to be addressed. And then for those following functions, we will not address them all in one go, but sort of step by step try to understand sort of how we can support that based on the experience which we've collected so far. And then we would sort of go into the sort of saying, okay, we've got the target state, but now let's try to see how the correlation works, this relationship part. And there we would hand over to this topology manager solution from Stephen and say, this is the first version and view of how we could do that. But if you would want to extend that, so we would have to talk about how do we externalize this information, how would we interface with other systems, etc. And then have a starting discussion about, are there any additional comments and contributions which we should consider? And again, rather have statements, questions, sort of available to just guide the discussion a little bit better.
Okay, perfect. So what I'll do, I'll just take some inputs from topology controller, try to put as our first or second slide, just to call it, it is a use case that we could evolve around the service assurance. And then I'll take these two slides from this slide deck, just to introduce
how much time do you have for that session?
I think we have maybe 10 minutes. I think we'll get it because
10 minutes.
I guess so.
Yeah, but if it's 10 minutes, then sort of I would say not more than 3 slides, and then you're very fast already. If you want to really make sure that people understand what's going on, I would really sort of strip down to the minimum of what you're wanting to express here.
Sure. I'll just check with Tal how he's planning, because some other folks are also there in the same slot. So we'll just work around it, how much time we get, and accordingly we'll take some content. We'll try to limit with 3 slides.
Okay, very good.
Okay. Okay. So any other comments, or could we wrap it and go for our next meeting? Okay. I'll
Fine
take
for me.
that.
Thank you.
Yeah. And thank you, Bernard, and thank you, Wim, for your great input and starting this discussion. I hope we able to deliver some value in this service assurance part. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your coordination. Yep.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day. Bye. Hey, hi, Pink. Hello.